Welcome to Mama Tales, a podcast on our collective motherhood journey. I'm your host, Sally Kuria. Thank you so much for bearing with me last week and sending love my way. Things are looking up, so I am slowly getting back to work. And today I have a story on a topic we haven't yet covered on the podcast, but something that is a big reality in motherhood. In this episode, we will be talking about loss. So this is a perfect time to put a disclaimer. If you are not in the best position to listen to a story around pregnancy loss and stillbirth, I highly encourage you to skip this one. However, if you're in a season of loss and you're trying to navigate that, or you're trying to help a friend who is in this position, then this episode might just be what you need. We never get into motherhood with the idea that we will not get to meet and raise the baby we are carrying. Yet, miscarriages and stillbirths are the reality for a lot of us on our motherhood journey. When Penny thought about her future, she often thought about the kids she would have. Not the big white wedding or the stellar career, but the ability to nurture kids of her own and build a loving family. But that journey has been anything but straightforward. Here's a bit of what's coming up.
So we went for the 8-week ultrasound, and I remember she used the car, it's the Doppler, and she was like, I don't hear the heartbeat, let me go get the big ultrasound. So this is the radio tech. So she goes, she brings back the big ultrasound. She was like, it's still very faint. I see the heartbeat, but it's very faint. I can't pick it up, Sana. The OBGYN comes, she's like, it's still 8 weeks, it's still early, don't worry. The next appointment we'll probably hear heartbeat. She's like, you just take it easy, don't worry. Come the next, maybe whatever, I think maybe she was like at 10 weeks, definitely we'll hear heartbeat. So we're like, okay.
As always, before we get into that, I do want to share my highlight this week. My highlight this week is very, very simple. I'm grateful for great health. It is easy to take for granted how fortunate we are by waking up every morning feeling healthy and functional and going back to bed in the evening feeling just that. When something happens that kind of disrupts that and your health is not guaranteed, then there's this domino effect that affects everything around you. I know it sounds very vague right now, but somewhere deep down you get it. I am just grateful for great health, and I no longer will take that for granted. Got a highlight you'd like to share? Please let me know. You can leave a note on Spotify if you're listening to this on the app, or fill in the form in the show notes of this episode to have it featured on here. I promise we're getting to the episode, but before we do, I want to officially invite you to our next event happening very soon. I'm very excited about this event, and this one will be the first in-person event that I'm hosting this year, and it will take place in Nairobi on the 26th of March from 5 p.m. That's a Tuesday, and we will be going through women's health with a special focus on endometriosis, a disease in which tissue similar to the lining of the uterus grows outside the uterus and causes unimaginable pain and effects like infertility to women who suffer from it. March is Endometriosis Awareness Month, and together with the Endometriosis Foundation of Kenya, we will sit down and have a chat about the effects of endometriosis. And we'll do this through Elsie Wandera's story. She is an endometriosis survivor and the founder of the foundation. I feel very honored that she chose to share her story with us navigating this and the effect that it has particularly had on her journey to motherhood. This event will be a culmination of her story, which I will be sharing throughout the month of March, so make sure to save the date. It will be happening at Baraza Media Lab in Riverside. For more details on what to expect, make sure to keep up with us on our social media pages, that's Mama Tales Podcast, on Instagram and on TikTok. And most importantly, be subscribed to the newsletter. You can find details on all those links in the show notes. Since this is an in-person event, space will be limited and entry is free. So you can secure your spot today by filling out the registration form attached in the show notes of this episode. Penny has always been a nurturer. Whether it's a stray pregnant cat or the young kids that she was around when she used to teach Sunday school, she'd always felt this need to nurture. Her mother was also a great inspiration. That sense of nurturing went into her work as a nurse as well. Being able to sit by her patients, hold their hands as she cares for them through the hard moments is something that she finds a lot of fulfillment in. So naturally, when she found out that they were pregnant, she was elated.
So this was in 2015. So like I said, we got married 2014 June. So now after 1 year of, so we had dated for a while. So we had dated for like, oh gosh, forever, like 4 or 5 years. So we got married in 2014. And then after a year, we were like, oh wait, we were just like, okay, let's try, let's start this thing, this family planning thing. So yeah, so we tried, and sure enough, I got pregnant that first, like first couple of tries. So this was 2015 August. So I did the pregnancy test. Those two lines came. I was like, yes, baby. We were so excited with my hubby. We had my excitos telling the parents. So we live in Canada. At the time, we lived in the US. So this will be relevant with our last baby because we were moving with the second one. So anyway, we lived in the States. We were telling our friends, our family back in Kenya, we're having a baby, the first baby. So I remember we went for the 8 week ultrasound. So we went for the 8 week ultrasound, and I remember she used the car. It's the Doppler. That car one, it's like a stick, not like the big ultrasound. And she was like, I don't hear the heartbeat. Let me go get the big ultrasound. So this is the radio tech. So she goes, she brings back the big ultrasound. She was like, it's still very faint. I see the heartbeat, but it's very faint. I can't pick it up, Sana. So she's like, okay, let me call the OBGYN. So she calls the OBGYN. The OBGYN comes. She's like, yeah, it's still 8 weeks. It's still early. Don't worry. The next appointment we'll probably hear heartbeat. So I was like, so me and my husband were like, okay, sawa. She's like, you just take it easy. Don't worry. Come the next, maybe whatever. I think maybe she was like, at 10 weeks, definitely we'll hear heartbeat. So we're like, okay. So then that was a Thursday. So we left that appointment knowing, okay, sawa, it's still early, baby is still developing. So we go home. Then that Sunday, so this was Thursday, we left the appointment. Sunday, I'm going to work. My husband is dropping me at work. So we passed by a store, Walmart. So we passed by, and then I look down, I see blood. I was like, hey, okay, hubby, I think let's go back home. I'm bleeding. Now we are new parents, first time. What does blood even mean? Is it normal, spotting, hatujui? So we go back home. So I called the OBGYN on call. Being a Saturday, it was the on call. So they were like, how is it a lot of blood? I was like, it's not a lot. So she was like, okay, if you see any clots, or if you start feeling like you're cramping, you need to come in. So I said, okay, sawa. So me and my hubby were like, okay, sawa. So even that day, so I even went to work. So I was on the way to work. So I was like, should I go to work? She's like, if you're feeling okay. So I went, and I work as a nurse. So I was there standing the whole day, and nothing happened. The shift went well. Hubby kept calling. He's like, he's all well at work. I'm like, everything is fine. No more blood. So I go back home at the end of the night. The night was fine. So the next day, my hubby, no bleeding. So I thought, maybe it's just normal pregnancy. I don't know. Mtoto ame move kidogo. Hey. So the next day, my husband was going. So I linger. So we are like, okay, let's just be fine. The OBGYN has said if nothing happens. So the next day, my hubby was taking the youth to like what was it? It was like a summer thing for the church. So he goes. When the hubby leaves is when things fall apart, literally. Chinua Achebe. So hubby was going with the youth to the church thing. So we're like, since there's no more bleeding, you just go. In case anything happens, you can always come back. And I also told my friend, just be on standby. Hey, 1 hour he goes, shock on us. Punde si punde, I'm there just relaxing. I start feeling a tightening in my belly. I was like, what was that? I stay again a bit. I'm like, okay, that was nothing. I stay another half an hour. Tightening, it's like a kamba being tied on your waist. It was like, I was like, okay, what is happening? So I call hubby immediately. I'm like, hey babe, you need to come back, things are happening. So I go to the bathroom, I start seeing the blood is coming again. So anyway, long of the short, I started having cramps. The uterus is contracting, baby. I mean, so here's the thing. So I call the OBGYN, and they're like, okay, are you seeing clots? So by this time, tennis ball. I remember they said, are you seeing tennis ball sized clots? I was like, oh no, they're just small. Nothing. So anyway, so after like 2 hours is when now I start seeing passing clots. So they were like, okay, you know what? I think we think you are having a miscarriage. So at this point, we were like, my husband by then had come back. I was there crying in the bathroom, back and forth. The cramps are there. So they gave me two options, I remember. And I think for if anyone has had a miscarriage, and especially if it's the first one, they were like, so you can either stay home, and I remember she said, pass the tissue. I don't know why those words stayed with me. I was like, babe, you're telling me pass, this is my baby, like this is our child. I just found it so like, okay, pass the tissue, or you can come in and we do a DNC. So basically, yeah, they go in and I think like just take out the baby or the tissue for them. So I said, I'm just going to go power through. So anyway, basically, I just stayed home, and I just miscarried in the bathroom. So this was our first baby. That was our in 2015. And then later on in the day, we went to now the OBGYN. That day they were like, okay, come in if you just want to do some kind of check and kind of see how things are looking. And immediately we went in, they did like another ultrasound. No, this one was transvaginal. Hey, that thing was bad, it was painful, and I was like, hey, what is this? So anyway, so I remember just hoping when I was looking at the camera, I was like, gosh, is there any sign, anything? I remember her saying, the sack is empty. You know, there are those words. I don't know why they stuck with me. I don't know if as a mom, the sack is empty. So there was nothing. So I remember I just looked away. I don't know. I just felt the OBGYN was just, there was like a impersonal, like, it didn't feel like nurturing or whatever. So I remember her saying, you can try again after a month. I don't know. It was just like, what are you saying? We have just lost a baby. Eh? So anyway, she gave us all these support things to do. My husband and I were just like, so we went out at now to eat. We couldn't even eat. I called my friend. I remember asking her, will I ever be able to get pregnant? If I can't, it was the first miscarriage. Yeah, so that was our first pregnancy. I mean, my first pregnancy, and pregnancy loss. I guess I could say a miscarriage at 8 weeks. How did I cope? I think for me, it was mainly, I think a lot of the church came around us at the time. We had a lot of support from the church. They were just like, just an older women also now coming out of the woodwork with their stories of miscarriage. Even that was the time I found out my own mom had had miscarriages. So they were like, oh gosh, Penny, trust me, I had, just relating to their, just hearing their stories and going like, hiya, so these things happen, people lose babies. Because the first one, I don't know if you've had a miscarriage, Sally, but I think when you have the first one, you think, gosh, I don't know, I just think it's not talked about as much, because I think people are so caught up in the, oh, you've had another baby, but we don't really talk about that miscarriage, or we don't get to grieve really. So I don't know how I think the coping came more so from just knowing that your body my body hadn't failed. When I just started hearing now other moms, my own mom, my mom-in-law, she was like, oh gosh, me, I lost so many babies. And those days you just move on, pick up and move on. So that helped a lot for both me and my husband. I guess also my hubby. I think sometimes we forget the men in all of this grief and loss, and you're just like, all right, let's go again. So just processing it with him was helpful as well.
I have never had a miscarriage, but I did get a scare with my second pregnancy. My first pregnancy was smooth, I never saw blood at any moment. So, when I was around 11 weeks pregnant with my second baby, I remember coming home after a particularly hard and physically challenging day. I went to the loo, and immediately I sat down, I saw blood. It wasn't a crazy amount of blood, but it wasn't a little either, not the type that you would ignore. And that made me freak out. I remember being on the phone with my gynecologist and immediately blaming myself for pushing myself too hard throughout the day, for standing way too long, for not taking care of my body. All this when I knew that this pregnancy was tougher than the previous one. The bleeding stopped eventually, but the guilt stuck with me for a while. And I wondered if Penny felt any of this.
Oh gosh, you have thrown me back. Yeah. Oh gosh, you have reminded me actually, because I remember I started questioning, was it the literally I started asking, was it that did I have to go to work? Was I so irresponsible? You put it on yourself as much as the doctor, everyone is saying, no, 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 it's not your fault, it's not your fault. It's just your body is preparing. It's or maybe your uterus is not used. But yeah, I remember definitely you're right, asking for sure what could I have done differently. And I think that's the thing with a lot of pregnancy things that happen. How could I have had a vaginal? But it's not a failure. I think that thing for they even say with a C-section. When I just listened to your most recent podcast on C-section, and I remember even there them so the last baby we had. I remember there they write failure to thrive. Mnapelekwa ER, failure to progress. I don't know what they call it, whatever term they use. Now there, a mom, you're so stressed. You're like, I failed to my body imeniangusha mtihani.
In spite of the loss, Penny and her husband decided to pick themselves up and try for a child again.
Oh, so yeah, so I think what also gave me comfort is just that, okay, let's try again. And hey, me, and it's not lost on me that getting pregnant is not easy for many people, but I was so grateful that after a month, imagine, so she said, okay, wait a month, let your period come, then you can try again. And that's what we did. So imagine after a month, my hubby, he's like, sure, let's do this. Of course, husbands are happy to jump on board the trying wagon. Let us do this. So after a month, we did it. We tried again, and we were pregnant again. So this now our firstborn. So after a month, we tried again, and sure enough, we got pregnant. He was due, I mean, he came in 2016. So this is our firstborn Christian. He's now 7. I mean, I've jumped the whole story so much, but he came on his due date. I mean, his was just, when you hear rainbow baby, like literally, um, first finding out he's a boy. When we went for the ultrasound, they're like, oh, he's a boy. You know how African cultures, we are like, hey, this boy, firstborn to take over the throne or whatever. I think I wanted a boy for the first one. I was just happy with my little boy. Um, and then so he was due June 23rd. I think with him his pregnancy was very, I mean, my skin was so clear. I don't know if it's boys who do that to the skin. Because remember, with my daughter, my skin broke. But with my son, I was just like happy. So, like I told you at the beginning, I love pregnancy. I started reading this book, which I would recommend for your audience if anyone listens here and loves to read about pregnancy. It's called Childbirth Without Fear, and it's such a beautiful book about just leaning into your body, listening to your body with pregnancy, just being in tune with what your home. I think we think a child, when you hear, "Hey, this baby is a happy baby," and let me tell you, I think it starts from conception. Like I think the hormones. I don't know if it's cortisol, stress. So just leaning into your body and being calm. If you're in a situation where you're able to be settled, I think it helps a lot. So I think with him, I was just in a happy place, which I think I'll tell you with my next pregnancy for my daughter. I was just very anxious a lot all the time, which I can see the difference. Yeah, so with him, he came, but I got gestational diabetes. So if that's something that I think for me, I also struggled with, I had to take insulin for a bit with him. But other than that, he came on his due date. Yeah, and now he's just a thriving, happy boy. He's really, when you hear that rainbow baby, Mihuyo, brought sunshine and love and joy. So,
Did you feel any sort of anxiety with your son's pregnancy, of just like, what if it goes the same way?
yeah, good question. With him, we were more cautious, like to tell people. So with him, we waited after like so at the 20-week ultrasound is when now we told people we are pregnant. So we didn't at rush up on Beleni at 6 weeks. Oh, so definitely at the beginning I was like, hey, let me do the right thing. Let me make sure I'm not eating sijui what at the beginning. But then I slowly started leaning into, oh, you know what? We lost the first one. That doesn't, it's not a life sentence for all other pregnancies. So I just started now just leaning into, okay, we are doing this. We are 10 weeks in, 12 weeks, 15. My belly is growing. You start feeling those two butterflies. I was like, wow, we are here. So at 20 weeks is now when we now started sharing, okay, mom, dad, around 18 there, 18, 20 is when now we shared the news. So yeah, we were optimistically cautious. We were happy, but like, hey, okay, ngoja ngoja kidogo.
We will take a quick break here, and when we come back, we will listen to what happened next in their quest of growing their family. Stick with us. What story would you give if someone asked you what the most impactful part of your motherhood journey has been? What's that one thing you wish you knew earlier or that you are proud to have overcome to get to where you are now? What's that thing that makes you laugh and cry at the same time? You see that answer? That is exactly why I created Mama Tales. This safe space for us to come together and celebrate our journey, the good, the not so good, but most importantly, the things that we have learned along the way that shape the parents that we are. If you have a story to share, I invite you to do it with us. Your story is powerful and it has the potential of touching more lives than you can ever imagine. So, if you have a story you'd like to share, we would love to hear it. Fill in the short story submission form I have attached in the show notes of this episode to get started. This is not limited to Kenya. We are able to record stories from all over the world. So, I'm looking forward to hearing from you. Welcome back. In this episode, we are listening to Penny's story. In the first part, she shared about her desire to become a mom and the unfortunate miscarriage that she had with her first pregnancy. She ended up carrying her second pregnancy to term and was eager to continue growing her family.
After now like a year and a half, hubby and I are like, he's an easy baby, let's try again. I think we can do this. We have this thing in the bag. So after like a year and a half, now we got pregnant. Now I got pregnant again. And so at that time we found out we were moving from US to Canada around, so before we found out we were pregnant. So it was in between. So we were trying to move to Canada at the time and we were so excited. And then like a month after, we were also like, okay, let's try this baby thing. So now we are like, so here's the thing. Why I say that is because I feel in that transition period, I think I was just so, I was very, I think I was anxious a lot, just trying to figure out the paperwork. A baby's coming. While we had planned, I just felt I was, me and those people, when I'm working on one thing, I'm just so focused on that one thing that I was like, oh gosh, will I be able to handle a baby now? We are moving. So I kind of felt I was just an anxious pregnant mom with our daughter. And then I think for me also having a daughter, I was like, God, will I be the mom that she needs me to be? I don't know if it's mother wound stories, all those things you hear, mother wound. I don't know. I just felt I I I think I needed to do some inner work. So with her, I was just like, okay, so we are moving countries. We are there packing bags, my boxes. I'm there 6, 7 months pregnant. While the pregnancy wasn't bad, and I think again it's also going back to that book. Hey, that book, it's a game changer. Childbirth without fear. I think for me it was more just the external things going on. We're trying to move countries, trying to set up shop. Hubby was still working. Me too, I'm also working. My son is now 2. But thank God we had support. We had a lot of support from our community, our friends. But now you see, we are moving to a new country, no people that we know. So I think, yeah, anyone who is in that state or that situation of just trying to settle in a new place, you are not alone. You are seen, you are heard, because it is not easy with young kids trying to move to a new place. So anyway, so she came also a few days after her due date. Um, and with her, I mean, everything was fine, but I could tell with her, I think she was more harder to settle than my son. Like I just was finding myself constantly like, oh my God, can you sleep, honey? Like her naps, I think would last half an hour tops, was the longest nap. Well, for my beautiful girl, she's now 5, my darling Shogo. But I think for me, because I was tense, she was also tense. I think neurologically, they mirror the mom's wiring. So I think because I was tense, she could feel that tension. So she would cry a lot. I was like, is this what is going on? Is this colic? But then after that, what this has translated to is she is such a vibrant, just a full of life personality. She's so different from who I am, and I just love her. Like, me, I was that good girl growing up. I didn't want to ruffle feathers, but my daughter is like, she will call you out. She is just amazing with her 5 years. So that's our second child.
After 2 years, Penny and her husband decided to try for another child.
So the fourth pregnancy, after her, was in January. So this was now 2018. She came. Then 2 years later, we are like, okay, you see, now I told you I love children. Me, if I could have 10, I could have 10 children if time allowed, but we will be good with. So the fourth pregnancy was around 2020, January. Um, so January 2020. So now we've kind of settled in Canada, not at Ivile. So January, we are like, hiya, okay, baby number four is coming. So at this time, we're kind of trying to settle down. We are not fully settled. And then we found out we're pregnant. We're like, okay, sawa, let's do this. We can handle it. We have to. So that was Jan. I remember I found out we're in church. I was in church, we're in church. Then I dozed off. And then my husband gongas me. He's like, hey, are you sleeping? And then I knew, that sleep is not a tea for kawaida. That is pregnancy. Like, I'm just trying to say how I knew I'm pregnant. So anyway, so we went, did the test. Sure enough, it was pregnancy. And then this was Jan. And then Feb, yeah, it was like a couple of weeks in. March comes. I was like, this was around the 12th week. I had gone for the 6th week ultrasound. Everything was fine. Then up on March, when COVID now was like rampant, I start telling my hubby, I don't know, something's not right. I just feel my belly is not growing as it should. I don't know. I just wasn't feeling right. I don't know. Mamas, I think we have a cassette. Kuna cassettes we have. Um, so my hubby was like, hey, okay, why don't we go? We checked and everything. So we went, OBGYN. That time it's my masks. People are not sure what's going on with this virus. So we went, we checked, ultrasound, baby was fine, nothing to write home. Wakatuambia, hey, you guys just go avoid the horses because there's this key virus coming from China. As we went, we just chilled. Now the daycares are closed. I'm home with both two kids. My husband was still going to work in person. COVID is there. I'm pregnant. So that's March. And then around April, now I'm heading towards the 20-week mark, up of 15, 16 weeks. I was like, hey, that's my husband. I'm calling him Dens. There's something definitely wrong. I just feel for 20 weeks, my belly should be bigger by now. Kuna kitu hapa. So since I was about to get to the 20-week ultrasound, so now that's the big one where they check the baby's legs, development, make sure everything is doing well. I was like, okay, since it's next week, let me just go. So this is around end of April. So I go for that 20-week ultrasound. I remember Kwanzaa I was alone because now my husband couldn't come because he was with the kids. Remember, now we're in Canada. We don't have people. It's COVID. Hospitals are like, hey, one person. Anyway, I was alone at the time. And so I go for that ultrasound, and I remember the ultrasound tech, she was quiet the whole time. I was like, I was there trying to make small talk. I'm there. Is there anything you can see? She's there. Nothing, nothing. It's okay, it's okay. You feel like, hey, okay. You can tell. I just felt there was like a weird energy. Like she was looking at the baby on the ultrasound for so long. There's a point where she like was using that wand. She was like, appa. But then when I'm asking her, she's like, oh, we can't say anything. The midwife will call you. At that time, I had a midwife because I was like, me, these OBGYN things, let me get a midwife because I think midwives, anyway, natural. I wanted a midwife. So that ultrasound took like 45 minutes. It was so long. I was like, why? So I go home, I tell her, hey, I told you, I think there's something up with the baby. But there was a heartbeat. I left there and she was like, listen to the heartbeat. Nikaskia. She was like, here, 10 legs, 10 feet. like trying to cover up, but I was like, I can't sense. Anyway, so I went home, I told hubby, I don't know. So, like in the afternoon, I see 3 missed calls from the midwife. I was like, Bas, there's no way they would have called if there was nothing wrong.
Next week, we will pick up her story from here. In the next episode, she talks about what happened with her fourth pregnancy, how they picked themselves up, and the ultimate challenge with their fifth and final pregnancy. Here's a bit of what's coming up.
So he's like, yeah, I don't think your baby will make last 24 weeks. But you don't know. At this point, it's like you don't know if she will, but even if she will, she might not have a good quality of life outside of the womb. So you could either just go through the pregnancy, see how far you go, or you can at this point terminate the pregnancy. Oh gosh, so we were in such a limbo. We were like, now we don't know what to do. I remember I came home, I had to drive back all the way home alone, crying, COVID. It was just madness.
I want to send a big thanks to Penny for sharing this very vulnerable part of her journey with us. If you're going through pregnancy loss or would like some support, please know that you are loved and resources are available to offer you this help. Reach out to me if you're in need of any assistance and we'll figure it out. Penny is a mom of 5, 3 earthbound and 2 in heaven, a practicing nurse in Canada, and a wife to a very loving husband of 10 years. The book that she mentioned, Childbirth Without Fear, is linked in the show notes should you be interested in checking it out. Thank you for all the support that you have given this podcast and the community so far. I hope that in turn these stories are important to sharing a real and authentic, beautiful image of the journey that we are all on. If this episode was impactful to you, please let me know. If you're listening to us on Spotify mobile app, there is a section where you can give me feedback on this episode. You can also feel free to share this with a friend or two. That would be really great. And if you want to help me keep the lights on in this space and continue delivering a lot of more of these episodes to you, you can do that too through monetary support, and you can find details on how you can do that in the show notes. Remember, save the date, 26th of March, if you are interested in anything endometriosis and women's health. Have a great, lovely week ahead. Catch you in the next one.